Well, this type of managed soil management, you retain more moisture. If you get an inch of rain, you get the most use out of it that you possibly can with this system. Whereas a conventionally tilled field, it will crust over and run off, take your nutrients with it. The water will not soak into the roots where they can take it up. And as a result, I've had people claim that I was irrigating my corn during a drought, comparing it to other fields they saw. A drought will eventually damage your corn, you know, and dry things up, but the no-till fields will hold out longer. Well, I would say, first of all, you have to make up your mind that you're going to do everything you can to make it work. And secondly, you're going to have to accept the fact that if it don't work exactly like you thought it would the first time or so, don't give it up. Keep on and hang in there and try to make it work. And I've heard that your crops will not be as good for a couple years. I didn't experience that because I still used the same amount of manure and fertilizer on the corn that I did. The only difference was, to begin with, that I planted it no-till. And if you kill your vegetation before you plant it, that should not be any problem. Well, you have to either adapt your planter or get a different planter or drill, whichever you use, a no-till that's designed for no-till. And other than that, you know, your harvesting equipment's going to be about the same if you keep your row width the same and all that. But as far as changing equipment, you have to, and probably your spraying equipment, you know, it's there again, it's an individual farm, however he's set up. In my particular case, I didn't have any land to spare, so I had to plant corn every year for a while on a lot of it. And of course, I would plant the cover crop and haul manure on it. But it still seems that you need to have other plants growing in that soil from time to time, rather than just that can bring on disease and weeds and everything else in a way. And if you grow the cover crop and plant the corn, my rotation is, after I harvest the corn, I'll either plant oats and crimson clover in that field for hay the following spring, or I'll plant some kind of a summer annual. Several years ago, I didn't have enough corn planted, using more silage than I was growing, and I planted Sudex in those alternate strips. And then that fall, we cut the corn and the Sudex together, mixed it for silage. And that silage tested just as good as the straight corn. I'll plant something like a combination of sunflowers and buckwheat and cowpeas, or various other things, and get those different plants into that soil. They each contribute something on their own, a particular thing to the soil. So the more plants you have growing in soil, the more benefits you get from these individual plants. Well, you know, you want to cover the soil first and last. That's the main thing with a cover crop. And residue will keep the soil from washing and what have you, but it's not a growing thing. It's not putting anything back into the soil. The old saying, land was meant to be covered, soil was meant to be covered, that rings true in this case. So if your cover crop is putting the nutrients back into the soil, and then when you terminate them, you got the residue there to hold your moisture and so forth, you know, it's no way you can lose on that. I have seen times past when it cost almost as much for the cover crop seed as it did for the fertilizer to grow the crop. But the fertilizer would grow the crop and do a good job, but that's all it done. If there was any left over, it leached into the soil. Where the cover crop, you get the nutrients to grow the crop, plus you get the soil protected and your moisture retention and your biomass. It's all in there, and as it gradually builds up over the years, it took me quite a few years to get to the point where I am now. You can't do it overnight, but if you keep doing it, it will build up and be worth it to you. Well, the cocktail mix is made up of anywhere from 5 to 7 or 8 different species. Like I use rye, hairy vetch, crimson clover, Austrian peas, and the radishes. This year we threw some turnips in with it. And like I say, all those crops mixed together complement each other when they're growing, as well as do different things for the soil. And like I say, the radishes will terminate themselves when the weather gets cold, which they have now. They'll die and decompose, and a brassica will suck up nitrogen fairly quick. So if you had any leftover nitrogen from your crop, it'll take that up, and then it'll die in the winter, and that nitrogen will be either taken up with the rye or whatever else is in there. It relays it in a way till you really need it for the corn crop. Well, like I said, when we initially started to grow rye, we planted in it standing up, and that was difficult. And when we started to roll, it's flat on the ground. You can see where you're going, where you've been, and it's a whole lot better. Plus the fact that if you want an allelopathic effect, especially from the rye for your weeds, it needs to be touching the soil. If it's standing straight up there and finally falls down, it's not going to have that same effect because it's not been in contact with the soil very long. I like to get as much biomass and nitrogen produced as I can, so I let it go till the day before I plant. And I'm taking the risk there. It's a judgment call. You want to risk the moisture or you want to get more biomass? It's up to the individual how you want to do that, and of course depends on your time schedule too. The taller it is, the better. You get more biomass, and like I say, the vetch will climb up that rye stalk, so when you hit them down, they stay there. Shorter rye by itself will come right back up again. Well, the cover crop is pretty thick. Like I say, we got winter weeds in it, but you're going to have them anyhow. But over the years, I've noticed I had a bad red root pigweed problem. And over the years, I've noticed where that's got almost negligible. And the main problem around here is Johnson grass. And the only way you're going to get ahead of that is to spray it with Roundup. And if I could not have to spray the cover crop when I roll it, I plant Roundup Ready corn and get in there when it's about 18 inches high and get everything that's come through. The residue from the cover crop will hold a lot of it back, but not all of it. You're never going to get rid of Johnson grass, I don't guess, but I don't want it. To me, it don't make good feed mixed in there, and it competes with the corn, and it's best sprayed and got out of there.